Trump really don't now have the very best of relationships. And really, who can blame the President of the United States? He's spoken out in our defence. He's told the world exactly what a bad mayor that we have over here in the United Kingdom, in London, in, of course, Sadiq Khan. And then, of course, right on cue, Keir Starmer had to weakly defend his friend, his chum. Yes, that's right, Sadiq Khan on camera. Not very well though, was it, when you think? Of course, as we've now seen, the development of the special relationship seems to be crumbling on a daily basis. And for those that missed it, you will note, of course, that the President of the United States very much aligned himself with the more powerful people of the royal family, His Majesty the King, King Charles III, and was effusive about Prince William, His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales. That didn't go unnoticed in that particular speech by 10 Downing Street. They were not happy. However, this has been going on a long simmering feud for quite a long period. And this is really what happened that many people don't realise, and this is from an excellent source inside the White House, that President Trump forced none other than the current British Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, the Right Honourable, we have to call him that, well, he forced him to do something on camera in the White House. Not happy as ever. Let me explain. Morning, good to see you, chums. Thank you so much for joining me today, and welcome one and all brand new subscribers. It is always lovely to have your company here in the very heart of London. Stopped raining, so I'm quite happy at the moment. Just to share that little bonmot with you. You know, I'm getting so fed up now with all of this particular situation. As many of you know, when President Trump was invited over for his second official state visit, Keir Starmer really broke protocol by simply deciding to announce on camera that, you know, here's this invitation, and he gave it to him. And this was a signed letter, a personal letter from King Charles. Now, this really does break royal protocol, simply because, you know, it's not the sort of thing you can do. Now, as I've said to you many times, I believe that the President of the United States, President Donald Trump, is actually enjoying the presidency a little bit more. He's far more reserved. Maybe he's not as outspoken. Staff seem to be sticking around a lot more, and that's very noticeable over here in the United Kingdom. Meanwhile, over here, as we've now seen, our freedom of speech is now being threatened at every single corner, and whichever way you look at it, there are problems with the British government, which haven't gone unnoticed, quite frankly, from the United States. And when JD Vance popped over here for a holiday, lots of that was reported back, including the fact that he was banned from dining with his family in a restaurant, which in my opinion, as I mentioned at the time, chums, I thought brought incredible shame on this country, that people could force that situation, politically or not. You know, we've seen all of these restaurants now closing, like Pizza Hut and stuff, and yet suddenly, you know, we're right to tell, no, we don't want these people in. You know, once your business is under threat and livelihoods are, should you be that dictatorial? That's my feeling. What's interesting though is, if you remember, when Keir Starmer took office alongside the rest of them, well, they decided that they didn't want to be peered upon by bigger and greater leaders, including the 3 times very first female British Prime Minister, who would have been 100 this year, the Right Honourable Margaret Thatcher. Very quickly, he made a very big scene of having her portraits removed. Didn't want to look at them, apparently found it off-putting, couldn't focus, all of that sort of stuff. How weak is that? Not only that, another great leader, Winston Churchill, was also removed, decided whatever. They didn't want him. And in other government buildings, they decided that they were going to remove far greater leaders than the weaker leaders that we now have in power, including the Chancellor of the Exchequer, who apparently wanted to be surrounded by forceful women, when in fact she herself is less than forceful and, more importantly, can't tell the truth. However, on that visit, which is a fascinating insight into just to the power level of who holds the power between, of course, the President and the British Prime Minister, was none other than this. You see, as you remember, President Trump instantly reinstated one of his very much British heroes, Sir Winston Churchill, the bust of Winston Churchill, which had been quietly once again sidelined under the Biden administration. And it was suggested to Keir Starmer in a speech that he might want to reference it. He didn't want to. Again, I have to say allegedly. Remember, this is a man who's turfed out the portraits, so he doesn't want to alienate anybody back home. However, it was strongly suggested that he did. And so you'll remember that in that speech, he had to reference, it's so nice to see the bust of Winston Churchill reinstated back here in the White House. That was the only thing he was willing to bend on. Now, if you want to know who holds the power, that came directly from the Trump administration. Keir Starmer didn't want to do it, can't abide it, doesn't want anything to do with that. Talks about flag waving, but as I pointed out, during the night, ripping the flags down and paying council workers £25 an hour for the luxury to do so. Either way, you kind of now know exactly which side of the fence the President of the United States is on. Many might suggest, no, he's not, but just these little gestures mean a lot to many people over here in Great Britain. And isn't it fascinating to know it took the President of the United States to force it? He didn't want to do it himself. Again, allegedly. Neil Sean in the very heart of London.